Good day. In 1898, America fought a war with a colonial power within the Americas called Spain. America defeated Spain in that war. It was a short war. That war is in history now called the Spanish-American War. And the benefit to America was that they gained the possessions of the Spanish in Cuba, in Puerto Rico, and in Guam, and also made the Spaniards to sell Philippines to them. America became very victorious and very powerful on the strength of that war. But leading up to that war, there was a civil war. There was crisis going on in Cuba, and it was a battle between rebels who wanted Cuba to be independent. And that war gave fodder to one media mogul called William Rudolph Hearst. William Rudolph Hearst had a very big role in pushing America into that war. He had a newspaper called the New York Journal, and he was a big media mogul who had a lot of other media businesses all across America. But with the New York Journal, he propagated what was later known to be yellow journalism, so that he could push public opinion, he could push a narrative that ended up causing America to enter that war. And that narrative he was pushing was one, that the Spanish were causing a lot of problems and that America needed to join that war and chase out the Spanish. He succeeded in that particular scope. In modern times, we have come to see the role that the media plays. The media is very powerful. It entertains, it informs, it sets agenda, and it also propagates propaganda. One of the biggest propaganda tools in this world, who also do all of the aforementioned, is the British Broadcasting Corporation. The British Broadcasting Corporation is an institution like no other. The British Empire may have gone into oblivion, but the British still have immense power and influence in their ability to shape narrative all over the world. The British Broadcasting Corporation is the veritable tool of the British in maintaining influence and power all across the world. Because this institution, though founded in 1920, still has presence in over 40 countries, but it's not that. It's the fact that they have programs they do in over 70 languages. Almost every single language of note is has a version for the BBC. The BBC has so many languages that they broadcast in. And as a tool, they help in shaping narrative to the interests of the British government, especially in those places where particularly the British have an interest they want to continue to pursue and an agenda they want to achieve. There's no place more that the BBC has had such a very profound role in, as was during the World War I, World War II, when they played a very big role against the German Nazis. And now the BBC, in its modern iteration, is being used very powerfully too in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, where Britain is as much a participant in that war as Ukraine. In fact, through the BBC, through the MI6, and through the unrelenting support of the British governments that come over these past years, it is very clear that Britain is at war with Russia. Not just Ukraine, but Britain. Good day and welcome to my channel, Ebimo Amungo's Perspective on Global Affairs. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. If you have any views regarding the video, please put them in the comment section. Do well to like and share this video. Britain is at war with Russia, and it won't be the first time. The British have always had a fear of Russia. That's how I'll put it. Because Even in the 19th century, there was the famous Crimean War when the Russians were expanding across the Caucasus and across the Balkans, and the British, in coalition with the French and the Ottoman then, because the Ottomans were the ones losing a lot of their territory, formed an alliance against the Russians and fought in the Black Sea in a war that is now known as the Crimean War. That war ended in a settlement somehow. The British extensive use of their power, their know-how in subterfuge, their know-how in operations, because the British have lasted a very long time in in history. They were very good, and they formed an empire that spanned several countries. They gave the world English. They gave the world common law systems. They gave the world a lot of things. And at one time, the British were at the zenith of innovation globally. There's a reason why they were the British Empire and they were the most extensive empire this world has ever known. But those days are gone, but don't tell that to the British. They still want to push their influence around. And one of the places and theaters where they're pushing their influence definitely is on the Ukraine war front. That the British are part of this Ukrainian war is not in doubt. The war may not have started if not for the intervention of Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister of Britain, who during the days when in the days when early days of the Biden administration, and just when the Russians were complaining bitterly about needing a new security architecture for Europe, complaining and calling for summits and meetings so that their own interests will be taken care of, complaining about all attempts to bring Ukraine into NATO, Britain was doggedly behind the Ukrainians. Boris Johnson was the one who was deployed to kill Kiev, to intervene and stop agreements that had been started in Istanbul, agreements that were forcefully put to the Ukrainians when the Russians marched close to Kiev and was almost at Kiev, prompting the Ukrainians to Zelensky to want a rapid end to that war, almost making him to capitulate and sign the memorandum being put forward by the Russians. Ultimately, Boris Johnson went ahead and made the Ukrainians to not sign that agreement. Boris Johnson has been involved repeatedly in Ukraine. He visited Ukraine during the term of his prime ministership 3 times, and since leaving the prime minister, leaving government, he has also visited 2 times. Liz Truss, though she may not have visited Ukraine, vowed and put up her very support for Ukraine in many forums. She had visited while she was foreign minister and under Boris Johnson, but she didn't get to visit during the period of her short premiership. Rishi Sunak, who took over, visited Ukraine 2 times. He visited, and just at the early days of his prime ministership, it was the first place of call for him, and then he pledged support for Ukraine and visited again, continuing that support for Ukraine. In fact, he pledged monetary support for Ukraine. Since he came into office, Keir Starmer has been a big supporter of the Ukrainians. He has visited 3 times. Once he visited and he signed the 100-year agreement between Ukraine and Britain, saying that they are going to have a very long relationship in exploring so many possibilities of investments. Those investments included rare earth metals, and that was the investment that Donald Trump sought after when he signed a new deal with the Ukrainians. But it is just not the involvement of the British political class that really has been the issue. It has been the fact that over the course of time, Britain has contributed well over, by the reckoning of some $12 billion to the campaign of the Ukrainians. They have given them humanitarian support. They have trained them in Sandhurst and in all the military facilities all across UK. And then even now, they continue to maintain a $5 billion support for Ukraine on a yearly basis. Besides that, Britain has been the most dogged opponent of Russia and supporter of Ukraine on the international diplomatic front, on the political front, and in every single place, including in the financial front, where Britain is leading the charge that Russia's assets should be seized. $300 billion of them. Most of them are not in UK. If they were in UK, they would have been seized. But what has been seized repeatedly from a lot of Russian oligarchs is their private and personal money and assets. That has been seized in London by the British under the framework of any kind of excuse they could. Any Russian oligarch associated with Putin has had their properties confiscated in UK. But the 350 billion, most of it is in Euroclear, and that is in Belgium. So for that, the British have only been stringent, mainly stringent in calling for this complete seizure of that money so that it can be used in funding the Ukrainian war. The involvement of Britain, as we see, has particularly been more with the military hardware. Challenger 2 tanks were sent to Ukraine. Storm Shadow long-range missiles were given to Ukraine. Comprehensive training was given to Ukraine by Ukrainian soldiers over the course of the period between 2014 and 2022, before the start of the war. Britain was very, very active in training the various Ukrainian army and Ukrainian military forces that were the first armies that fought the Russians in the early days of the war. But if anything has shown Britain's involvement in this war, it is their cooperation, the Ukrainian intelligence unit's cooperation with the MI6 and also with the CIA. The MI6 is by far one of the most solid and most knowledgeable intelligence organizations in the world. And when they come and form a triumvirate with the CIA and the Mossad against the Russians in Ukraine, they have turned to be one of the biggest problems the Russians now have. The MI6 has shifted from having information sharing and all those things they do to shifting the Ukrainians towards covert operations. Now we hear that the Ukrainians are doing a lot of sabotage operations within Russia. Black Op operations that include Operation Spiderweb, an operation that led eventually to the destruction of the bomber fleet of Russia, and also problems in the Caucasus, especially Azerbaijan, in a way that is now creating a lot of tension and worries for the Russians in that region. The MI6 has become a thorn in the flesh of the Russians. Every day, besides the fact that they give technical details about the locations of Russian troops, location of Russian military assets, and even strategic assets, they are very much a part of those operations, even on the ground. A few days ago, some of those operatives of Britain were captured in an operation called SCAR-12 by the Russians. They captured them and they put them out there. They put out the word that they have them. Of course, the Russians will be holding them and hoping that the British will come for them so that they can have some. What they normally do in such matters is that they exchange prisoners. The operations that are going now, the way the war has changed tone has become very clear. These days, the Ukrainians have they are now leaning heavily on black ops operations that are being supported by the by the MI6. The MI6 also was involved so much so that it irritated the Russians so much that a training facility that was couched as a visa center where the MI6 was using to train a lot of Ukrainians and also possibly on the use of drones, on the use of on intelligence sharing. The Russians bombed it a few days ago. Sergei Lavrov is not mincing words when he says that Britain is 100% involved in this war. And besides being involved in the war, these days we hear about situations where operations in the Black Sea, operations in the Baltic Sea, operations in the Caucasus, Caspian Sea are ongoing at the behest and of the British. The British are doing all they can to undermine Russia in this war, and they are not relenting. Keir Starmer particularly has become a very, very, very big thorn in the hands or let me say, an asset for the Ukrainians, because he continues and relentlessly engages with Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump has said that he's not so keen on this war. It's not keen on Zelensky. He has a personal grouse with Zelensky because it was during a phone call to Zelensky that one Ukrainian accused him of asking for some information about Biden, and that was what was used against him in impeaching him the first time. I have said it that Donald Trump is not a friend of the Ukrainians, and nothing can make him change his mind about supporting the Ukrainians. His way out and his off-ramp has always been that there should be peace and peace, peace. He has found another off-ramp when he says that Europeans should buy arms, give it to NATO, and the NATO sends it to Ukraine. He's finding everything and every means of not supporting the Ukrainians. But the British, Keir Starmer particularly, has been unrelenting. Keir Starmer went to meet with Trump the other day when he visited a Scottish golf course. And Keir Starmer's purpose was very clear. It was just to remind Trump about commitment to the Ukrainian cause. If it was possible, he probably would have spent some energy in trying to get China not to support Ukraine again. But that is not one area he has endeavored to try and put pressure on the Chinese, just as the European Union under Ursula von der Leyen tried to do the other time. So Keir Starmer is unrelenting. The British are unrelenting. This is not unfamiliar territory to them. The other video I had, I talked about possibly the motivation that may be causing it, because the British, like I said, are a very financialized economy, and financialized economy tend to invest in places that have mineral assets. Ukraine has a lot of it, and Ukraine had promised a lot of it or had sold a lot of it, of these mineral assets, to oligarchs in London who see their investment going away. Bankers like the Rothschild, bankers like BlackRock, all these investors that are situated in London and who support the British parliamentarians in many forms, who support their campaign. Already it is even said that at least a good number of Keir Starmer's cabinet has a lot of people who had the support of oligarchs from Ukraine and from the former Soviet Union who supported their campaign. And this is how they continue to put pressure on them and want their own investments to be safeguarded by the British government. The British government may just also have other intentions. They've already told France and Britain have come to an agreement that they are going to give Germany, which does not have a nuclear weapons, a nuclear umbrella should America leave. They're already making that kind of thing. They are talking on nuclear against Russia. These days we hear about nuclear improving the nuclear triad against Russia, possibility of Russia improving, making a lot of operations going on in the Baltic Sea to the point where the head of the of Russia's naval assets the other day said particularly that Britain is planning black op operations in the Baltic Sea that will point to Russia as being the instigator of certain attacks against American assets in that place. It won't be uncommon and it won't be new and it won't be a surprise to the world. So to say that Britain is a full part of this war, it's not to say something that is not the truth. It is the truth. This war is being fought with Ukrainian bodies, but with British full involvement in the way they send their propaganda, the way they use the media, the way they try to shape the narrative, continue to promote the agenda that Russia is the aggressor, the way that they make the narrative and shape it. And it is for this reason why in all the media organizations that are in Britain, there's none that is sympathetic to the Russia's point of view. None. It is a complete capture of the media in Ukraine, in UK and in Britain that to this point, the Russians are the enemies and the ones who created an aggression and who should be dealt with and who should be punished for their aggression against Ukraine. Nobody is interested in Russia's point of view, Russia's interest, not when it has to do with the British. But there's different narratives out there. Not everybody buys into the narrative being put forward by the BBC. And thankfully, the world has changed. These days, people have options. Google and X have become very veritable, powerful tools, media organizations where people go and get options, see the other side of the news. In fact, to the extent where an organization like the Telegram was so irritating to the French that they had to arrest Durov, the owner of the Telegram. In UK, they've created new social media laws that try to limit the narrative that is out there, the statements against or for the war in the social media. Because these days the news is now in the hands of the social media. People source most of their news not from the Telegraph or the Times, but mainly from social media, X, Instagram, Facebook, and Telegram. And this loss of narrative is a concern to the British, and for that they have made a law to crack down on news that can be put out in the Telegram. In fact, more people are being jailed in the UK for their posts and their tweets that may go contrary to the viewpoint of the British government and its narrative being put out there in the BBC. This is where it is now. There's a war going on in Britain about controlling the narrative, but unfortunately, due to X, due to Facebook, due to Telegram, and due to all those channels, Substack, they are losing their narrative. But it doesn't mean that they will give up. The British are fully invested in this war, and we will continue to see them play a role no matter what the Russians do. The Russians are aware of it and have threatened severally that they will attack the British, but they are not relenting. The only thing that we know is that they are losing that media narrative, and a lot of other people are seeing just how the war is going against Ukraine. They are seeing the viewpoints of Russia. They are seeing the unrelenting propaganda of the British and the collective West. And they are also in a better place now to make judgments for themselves. Because even channels like this, like the one I have, courtesy of the platform given by Google, is challenge to the narrative and their ability to control the narrative. This is where I end my video for today. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. If you have any comments regarding the opinions I've expressed, please put them in the comment section. Do well to like and share. Until I see you in my next video. Goodbye.